Okay, before we get started with editing this small project, I want to go over a couple basic things. When you bring media onto the timeline, you're not directly editing your original source files that you have on your computer. You're actually editing references to those files. So if you, as you cut these files, let's say you split them, trim them like this, and you delete this clip and you get rid of that and you trim this and you do all this stuff to this footage, you're not actually touching your original source files. Those remain untouched. You're only editing references to those files. So don't worry that when you're editing in here that you're actually causing damage to your original source files. Now with regard to that, let's say you're working on a project and you want to save what you've done. What you'll do is you'll come up here and you'll go to File and you'll go Save. And what Vegas does, it's going to save all their project files as what's called a veg file, a .veg file. So if I just call this project 1, it's going to save that as a veg file. And then if I close out of this and I go back to open, I can reopen that veg file and it brings the project back in as it was. Now there is one word of warning with that, since it is, Vegas needs to know where your original source files are. So let's say if I bring this clip to the timeline like this, if I bring that clip to the timeline and then let's say I delete the source file on my desktop, let's say I delete that file, it's going to say here media offline, because now Vegas doesn't know where that file is. So now I'll get this error message saying the source file is missing. So once you save a .veg file, you can't move your source files, because if you do, you're going to get this message saying that Vegas cannot find the file. So just be aware of that Vegas is non-destructive editing. The clips that you edit in Vegas do not touch the original source files, but they need to know where those source files are in order to reference them. So Vegas is a non-destructive editing program. Hello and welcome to this super amazing video on how to use Vegas Pro for absolute beginners. This is Vegas Pro 16 that we're using. It has a couple new features over Vegas Pro 15, but if you have 15 or earlier versions, it'll still work. I'll touch on some of the new features, but not of course all of them. So I've been using Vegas Pro for several years and I love it. I think it's a great program. But even though it's easy to use, I think at this point, and relatively well laid out, there's a lot to the program. And so I would encourage you to go to the Magic's website and download the latest manual, which is actually over 500 pages long. And it comes in different languages too. So even though Vegas Pro has a reputation for being an easy program to learn, like a consumer editing program almost, it actually has a lot of features. And even though I've been using it for several years, I'm still learning things every single day about the program. So I can't say enough good things about it. I like it. Is it perfect? No, but no editing software is. This tutorial is basically broken into 3 sections. You've got to edit, basically got import, editing, and rendering. So those are your 3 major things that you need to do with the program. So the first part of the program is you've got it open and you're like, well, how do I get, and I don't know what anything is, where do I get my footage? How do I start? And there's 2 ways you can do this. The easiest way, unbelievably easiest way to do it is by simply having your desktop viewable when the program's open and simply dragging the media to the timeline. And when you do that, you'll get this message sometimes asking if you want to match your project settings. And the answer to that question is yes, you want to do that. So this is the simplest, easiest way to get your footage on. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Just click and drag it. But you do have to have the desktop viewable. If you don't want to do it that way, the other way you could do is just go into File, Import, Media, and then just go to wherever your files are from there. So once you've got your media on your timeline, you're almost ready to go. And so you'll notice when the media comes in, it comes in with the video and the audio attached. These can be decoupled very easily because they'll go around with each other, but usually sometimes you'll want to switch out your audio or something like that. If you want to get rid of the audio track, all you got to do is click over here on the track here and right click and delete track, and all you're left with is your video. if you make a mistake and you want to reverse what you just did, you just come up here to this arrow and undo what you just did. So that's one way, easy way to get rid of your audio. The other way is if you highlight both the up, you press Control and you highlight both clips. If you press U on the keyboard, then that ungroups them, and then if you click off, you can see they're decoupled. Now if I want to hook them back up together, I just line them up, select them both by pressing Control and hit G. So G and U are two helpful. Now let's say I want to just move these two clips together. If you hit Control A, it selects everything, and then you can just drag everything together wherever you want it on the timeline. Now when you're getting started on a project, a lot of people, you might be tempted to push this all the way to the front and start over here, but it's usually best to edit giving yourself some space here, because sometimes you'll be editing something and you'll want some wiggle room basically over here. So when I bring events down to the timeline like these are called events, I like to leave some room here. And then when we go to render, what we'll do is if you click up here where you see the cursor turns into a double arrow, if you click and drag, it creates what's called a loop. And then those loops can be re-rendered out. And to get rid of that loop or just deselect, you just click away from it. And even though it stays up there, it can be resized at any time. So the other thing is, under the new Vegas Pro, they have this feature that when you come up here on the top, you see that scrub bar now. Now, I'm not sure, it's such a new feature, I'm not sure if I like it or not, but I really just prefer to do all my editing here on the timeline. You can, by hitting, if I move the scrub bar, if I click on this clip and then I hit you can see it dimmed out. I set an in point, and if I move it over here and I click and I go out, I create an out. I can trim the clip up here and then just drag the clip trim down to the timeline. But honestly, I don't like working that way. I just like having everything on the timeline and doing all my stuff here. Another important point that I'd like to make is, let's say we're working with a lot of clips. On how I'm showing you how to edit now, we're working with a relatively small project. But let's say we had a bunch of clips on here, and so when you're working on the timeline, it can get really crowded down here. So one thing you can do, you'll see that I'm dragging things on this one timeline. But when you're working on a big project, it can get even more crowded than that. So one thing that you can do is if you come up here to Insert, and you go Video Track, and you go Insert Audio Track, you can tell this is an audio track because it's got the meter built on it. So that's one way you can tell. So the video track went up here and the audio track went up here. But what I can do is if I just left click and drag up, I can move the audio track. So you can move the tracks around this way. But let's say I'm working on a project and I got a bunch of clips up here. One thing I like to do is I just like to add an audio and a video track up here, so then I can just move the clip that I may be working on up here to give me more room to move things around. So that's one thing that you can do when you're doing all your editing on the timeline, like I recommend doing, or how I like to do it. And so you can add these tracks to just move stuff around to give yourself more space. And you'll see sometimes they'll get out of place. So like the audio track might stick up here, but you want it down here, you just click and drag it down there. So if you need more room and you're finding that it's getting too disorganized and crowded, you can simply just drag your clips up here and have room to view them up here and then move them up on a top track. Then when you've got everything down on one timeline, like let's say you've got everything down on one timeline, then you can simply delete these tracks, and you just go delete and delete. So that's one way to have extra room to move around. There's also this feature called storyboarding. You can, if you had a bunch of clips here and you wanted to rearrange them, you can just rearrange them. You hit Alt and you click and drag, and then you can just move clips by clicking Alt. You can move them all over around up here and rearrange them, and you'll notice how it's replicating all those changes down here on the timeline. So this is just another way of organizing your clips, but you have to press Alt when you drag the clips and move them around. Also, if you press Control and the scroll wheel, you can scroll in a little bit better. But personally, I like to do all the editing right here on the main timeline. If I want to move something around, I just move it around down here. I don't necessarily use this function yet, but maybe over time I'll grow to appreciate that. Now let's say you've been working on a project and you've just made a mess, and you're just lost and you don't know what to do. The one thing that you can do is just come up here to go to File, Close, and save changes no, and it just clears everything out, and you can start over again. And then again, you can also do undo or Control Z if you want to undo something you just did. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring these clips back in. I press Control to highlight them, and now I've got my clips up here on the timeline. There's that scrub bar. I'm going to ignore that. Now, one other thing to notice is when you bring the clips in, they're automatically highlighted. So if I just clicked and dragged them right now, they come down connected. But you may not want them connected, so when they come in highlighted like that, just click away, and then you can just drag one clip at a time. If you wanted to drag both clips at the same time, you press Control, and then you can just drag them down to the timeline. So, but I just usually drag stuff individually, and again, just drag it down to the timeline. Vegas automatically recognizes that you're doing that and say, yes, you want to match the project settings, and then I'll just click and drag this other clip down. Now, down here on the timeline, it's pretty intuitive. You've got your video, you've got a video track, you've got an audio track. These can be expanded by clicking this thing, and you can maximize it and see. I think one of the biggest problems that people get into with Vegas is just learning the interface, because you notice how the clips are changing in size. So if you come over here to the side, so these are the controls that we're talking about. If you're clicking here, these are important controls to realize. This plus sign makes zooms in, this zooms out, and this makes the track height bigger, and this makes it smaller. So you'll use these controls a lot down here in the corner, this little plus sign and this negative sign. And sometimes if you're working on a big project, you might think you've lost your tracks, but you just come over here to a scroll bar. So let's say I've got a bunch of tracks on here. If I add just a whole bunch of tracks, you'll see I have a scroll bar, and then I can see everything. And now if I want to see all of them, I just hit this negative sign, and I can resize the track height so that I can see all my tracks at once. So that's one thing that you can do as far as navigating the surface. And the other thing is that, like, let's say this cursor is really important. If wherever you click, the cursor goes. So I think this is a really major control right here, is this cursor, which is also your playhead. But it controls where things get cut at and where you're playing at. So if I click under the clip, I can see it up here. If I click over here, I see nothing because there's no clip above it. So if I want to see what's on what I'm looking at, I've got to click underneath the clip, like down in this area, so that I can see the clip above. And if I'm clicked on nothing, then you're going to see nothing. So just you move your cursor simply by clicking down here underneath the clip, and you can put your cursor pretty much anywhere you want to put it. Now, so let's start by let's say we want this edit these clips. Now this clip is just a guy and a girl talking. She's kind of irritated with him, and they're waiting for someone to show up. So I'm just gonna play it from, I think, right about here. Let's just go.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
But Andy's gonna be here any minute. It's almost 10:30.
And?
He's the guy from the property management place.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to stop it right there. So I want to pick this up. Let's say I want to...
And you can start your dialogue. So
okay.
She's going to...
action.
So here she's starting to talk here now.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
Okay, so the one thing here is that when you hit the space bar, if you hit the space bar, it starts the cursor moving. You hit space bar again, it takes it back to the beginning. Now the control that you're going to be using a lot is Enter on the keyboard. So by turning your scroll wheel, you can actually zoom in a little bit closer on the clip. So if you turn your scroll wheel, you can actually move.
To the car.
So one thing I do is you'll notice here on the audio track, I can see where the voices start. So what I'll do is I'll list.
You know, this would go much faster.
So see.
This would go much faster if you start. This would go much faster. You know, this would go much.
Now if I want to stop the playhead right at a certain point, I just hit Enter.
You know, this would.
So play takes it back. The spacebar takes it back to where it was.
You know, this would. You know, this.
So right there's when I started. If I want to stop it,
you know, this would go
here I hit Enter, we'll stop it right there. And then if I hit the arrow keys, I can just go back to where I was.
You know, this would
So I want to start it right there. So now once I've found my point where I want to start it, this is where Vegas really shines. You just come to the front here and see that icon that it changes into trim start event. You just click and drag to your cursor point. And now she should just be starting.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
Andy's going to be here any minute. It's almost 10:30.
Okay, so now let's say,
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
so I want to stop the cursor right there because I know he's going to say the next line. So right here, if I hit the space bar, if I put the cursor right here, click underneath, I'll hit the space bar.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
Stop it right there by hitting enter. So that's where I know I want to stop. Now if I want to maybe go a little further, I can hit the arrow keys. And you'll notice as I do over here, you'll see it shows me I'm at the 34-second mark of the 5th frame. So every time I hit the arrow key, I'm going by 1 frame. So I go right there, say, and then if I hit S, I'm split the clip right there. So now I want to cut over. I know I want to cut over to this guy. So I'll come over here.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes to the car.
And so I hit enter there to stop it. Now I know I can just trim this clip down right there. Now let's say this clip is in the way and I want to move it. All I have to do is click on it, click and drag it out of the way like that. Now you'll notice, this is a good time to explain something. When you're moving your cursor on the clip, you'll notice it changes. If it's just an arrow like it is right now, that means you can click and drag the clip anywhere you want it. But if you move it to the front, that's becomes a trim tool. If you move it up here, that's the fade in tool. If you move it here, that's the opacity tool. There's a fade tool on the back. Here are this is to go into your add effects, and this is to go into pan and crop. And so you be aware of what the cursor looks like, because what the cursor looks like will tell you what it is. So on this timeline alone, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other icons that it could be. So, but if it's the arrow, I can just click and drag it. So then if you come down here, you'll notice there's some controls down here that are important to pay attention to. So this is automatic crossfade. By default, you want to leave it on the normal edit tool. These are other edit tools, but I don't think you'll be needing those. Always make sure that you're clicked just here on the normal edit tool. And then also down here, you have what's called automatic crossfade. So what that means is that if I drag a clip here, that'll automatically, like if I'm going to do it, I don't have to add any special effect to do a crossfade. It just automatically crosses. But also it has on here what is called snapping, and snapping is, I use snapping all the time. So when you come here, you'll notice, see how it turns blue? That means the clips are perfectly joined together. So be aware of, you got your snapping control, you got your automatic crossfades, and there's another function here called auto ripple, but I'll leave that for another discussion. But that automatically folds in, collapses, clips in, so it fills in empty gaps. But it can be confusing at first to use auto ripple, so it's better probably just to leave it off for right now and just click and drag what you want in place for this basic tutorial. So anyway, let's start back at the beginning. I click down here underneath the clip and let me hit the space bar.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
Who's that?
The guy from the property
Okay.
management place.
Let's do that again.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
See, now if you felt like that was holding too long on that, I can show you what auto ripple does right now. So let's say if I were to trim this clip, I can trim it down right now, but it leaves a gap. You see that? So let me hit Control Z on the keyboard to undo that. Now if I turn auto ripple on, watch what happens. See how it automatically closes that gap? So it's just a preference of using auto ripple or not.
You know, this would go much faster.
Sometimes I have it on, sometimes I don't.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
So again, if I thought he paused too long, let's say he's pausing too long, and I can cut this little part out, I come here to the trim tool. Now you got to look very carefully. On this one, I would be trimming this clip, and on this one, I'll be trimming this one. So be aware that one's trimming the end of an event and this is trimming the front. So this is trim event start, this is trim event end. Be very careful. And then you can click and drag and I can just trim it. With auto ripple off, it won't close the gap. So then I would have to pull it there myself.
Go much faster if you start taking some boxes out of the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
Go much faster if you start taking some boxes out of the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
Okay, right there I hit enter to stop the cursor dead in its track. And now I know I want to go back to her dialogue. So I'm going to hit split right there. I'm going to drag this out of the way. And I'm going to drag this one back over here. And we'll see where she is here.
Any minute. But Andy's going to be here any minute. It's almost 10:30.
And?
Any minute. But Andy's going to be here any minute. It's almost 10:30.
And?
Any minute. But Andy's going to be here any minute. It's almost 10:30.
Okay, so I know she's going to say and any minute here. So I have auto ripple off. So I'm going to leave a gap. I'm going to trim this down here. Now just drag this into place.
Here any minute.
And?
He's the guy from the property management. He's the guy from the property management.
So I'm going to hit enter there to stop it. And I'm going to hit S to split it. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to grab this one because I know he's going to say he's the guy from the property management place.
Who's that?
Let's just put this here and see how that plays.
Andy's going to be here any minute.
And? Who's that?
The guy from the property management place.
So I want to cut back to her. I hear her sign there. So we're going to hit split there. And I'm done with this clip, so I'm just going to delete it. And then I'm going to just bring this one back. And let's see here.
He's the guy from the property management place.
So what I can do is just trim this down here.
Good.
Okay, so now we're done if I can trim this down all the way there. And then I have all my clips together.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out of the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
And? Who's that?
The guy from the property management place.
Now let's say I deleted this clip and I didn't mean to. I could just drag it back down to the timeline because he's going to knock on the door, that's why. So I'll bring it down. And so what we're going to do is trim it down to here and just bring this clip in like that. And then he knocks on the door. And we'll leave it right there. Okay, so now that's how you basically get all these clips kind of put together. So I realized that kind of took a bit longer than I realized.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out of the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
And? Who's that?
The guy from the property management place.
So that cut, if that cut maybe seemed a little abrupt right there, I can just come here and trim this, add a little more space to it like that, and then just bring that back like that. There we go. And then there's the knock on the door. Okay, so now we got all our clips positioned. Hopefully you saw a little bit about how to move things around. Now if I want to increase the volume, if you look over here, you've got your audio meters. You can increase the audio on the clip itself right like that.
It's almost 10:30.
And you can also
Andy's gonna
bump
be
up the
here any
volume
minute.
here.
And? Who's that?
The guy from the property management place.
With regard to audio, sometimes when you bring audio in, you can't really see it here, even if I make the track height bigger. But one thing you can do if you want to make the audio, bring the audio up to its maximum volume, is if you click on those tracks and then you right click and you go to switches, there's one that's called normalize. And you can see it automatically increases the volume across all of your audio tracks. So rather than adjusting your volume here or adjusting your volume here, you can simply normalize it, and then you'll be able to not only know that it's at maximum volume, but that also you'll be able to see it on the, as it's displayed here on the monitor. So that's a nice trick to do. And then if you want to add effects, like you want to add color correction, you just click on here where it says event effects, and you can go in, and let's say I wanted for some reason to make this whole thing black and white. So what I do is I would go in here to event effects, I'll go to black and white, and I'll click add, and I go OK, and it's going to make this clip black and white. I could also, if I come over here on these tabs, you have transitions, you've got Explorer window, project media window, media generators. So this is where all your main controls are. If I wanted to, let's say I wanted to, now I made this clip black and white. Let's say I want to make all these clips black and white. I would just right click on this clip. I go copy. Click this clip and then hit shift. I can select all the clips. I go right click, and if I go paste event attributes, all the clips now are black and white. And so you can apply, once you apply an effect to one clip, you can apply it to all of them by copying and pasting them. Now let's say I want to add a title to this. So what I'll do is I would just come down here to legacy text and drag it on the timeline like that. I click in here and I can hit Control A and I can call it the apartment. Let's say this is the name of this. So I click it there, put it there, and of course I can choose my font or whatever I want in here. If I come in here on this icon, that generated media, you can change the placement of it. You can change the color. Let's say I want to make it blue. I can do that. So you can do that. If I want to fade this name in and out, I can come up here to this control and just pull to fade in, pull there to fade out. So fade in and fade out.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes off of the car.
Okay, so let's say I wanted to fade that out now, and I'm done. I just pull this here and I can fade the audio and the video, right like that. So there's our intro. Now let's say I don't like this blue and I just want to leave it white. I can go event effects, not event effects. I can go on this one is the generated media, and I can click on effects, and for the text color under properties, I could change it. I could change it back to white or whitish, yeah, right, like that. And let's say I wanted to do like a slight zoom in on this. I can go into the pan and crop tool, and I can move this to the first keyframe, and then drag this all the way to here to the end of the timeline, and then just push that in a little bit. And now I'm going to have a little bit of a push in there.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes off of the car.
Okay, and so that's it. Now let's say I wanted to add some music to this. I can go into File again, Import Media, or what I could do is, if I can get access to the desktop, I can just drag the music I want straight on again to the timeline like that. Maximize this, and then just adjust it. So now you'll notice here it looks like I've lost control of my timeline, but it's all still there. So again, if you click here, this is one other tip. If you click here and you scroll in, you can see the whole, it puts you in the center. So like if I click here and then I scroll in, it centers in on wherever I'm. So let's say I want to have some music in there. I'll just come in here and I can either trim this all the way down just like that. Keep trimming, and I'm hitting the scroll wheel to resize. So if I hit the scroll wheel, I'm turning the scroll wheel on the mouse, it can resize my image. So then I can add, I have music there. So now if I hit play, I have music. But that's way too loud. If that's way too loud,
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be
I
here
can just
today.
adjust the volume on the audio right there, on the music right there. Okay, so we've seen that. Okay, so now I've got my whole clip done. I've adjusted my audio down, and then let's say I'm ready to render. So if you click and drag up here where you see that double arrow, you create what's called a loop. And then what you do is there's a lot of videos on rendering, but you'd simply go into, first thing is to go into properties and set this from 8-bit to 32-bit floating. You want to set this to from good to best. Oops, good to best. And go OK. And then if we come up here, once you set those properties, you go to render as. And this brings you to your templates. And there's a number of ways you can render this out. One might be the Magix AVC. So let's say this was 30 frames per second. I can render it out either this way or this way. So this one, this one will work if you have an NVIDIA graphics card. If you don't have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can just use this one. And if you don't want to use that one, you can also go into Sony where AVC, this one. And then this is also a very good codec as well. And it uses the CPU, not a graphics card. And then you would give it a name, where you want to put it, and call it the apartment. And you'd hit render, and then it just renders out, and you've got your video done. So a lot of it is just getting familiar with and then cancel it if you don't want to cancel it. So just to kind of review, let's just do a kind of a quick review. You import your clips by going File, Import Media, and then you just drag them onto. You click the ones you want, hit Control to select the ones you want, and go Open. And then they'll come up here in the media bin, and then you just drag them onto the timeline. Once they're on the timeline, if it's just a regular arrow cursor, you can just click and move them. You can resize an event simply by clicking and dragging. If you do something that you didn't want to do and you made a mistake, you can just click the undo and keep clicking it until you've undone what you've done. Now, one thing that could happen is if you resize your window accidentally, something important to know is you can come up here to View, and you go to Window. So let's say I somehow messed this, I jacked this whole thing up. I move a bunch of stuff around. It looks weird. I don't know how you'd even do this, but let's say you just got everything all weird. You could just come up to View, Window Layouts, Default, and it resets everything back to how it should be. Now this used to be a trimmer window, but now the trimmer window's here, but I hardly ever use the trimmer. You can do all the trimming you need right down here on the timeline. So, but that's the video preview, the trimmer, all your text and your media generators are all over here. All your video effects, your special effects are here, and you can just click and drag them onto your clips, your transitions as well. Everything, there's an Explorer window, and then your project media. And then you have your tracks over here. You've got your audio. This is your video track. This is audio track. If you want to drill down in more, you just right click on that thing they call the hamburger. If you click on something you want to deselect it, just click away from it. And those are all the basic controls. And then if you want to split something, you hit S. And if you want to undo that, you just hit Control Z again. So this has just been a kind of a quick introduction into Vegas Pro 16, and I hope you found it helpful. One other thing I should mention before I go is that when you're watching something, if you're not getting good playback, you can come back here and just set it onto draft and lower the quality of the playback here on the monitor, and sometimes it'll play back a little smoother. But I wasn't noticing any problems with the playback, so I didn't do that. And I should also mention that if you can add effects to the audio as well. So audio has an effects button. If you click on it, you can come in here. Like Vegas has this one called Express Equalization, and if you click Add and OK, you have the effect on here. You can lower like the low end, and it gets rid of sometimes background noises. And you can tell if something is activated if it's colored. So like it's lit up with color, that means an effect has been applied. So the effects here, you see how it's white? That means there's no effect applied. And see where it's green, that means you know an effect's unapplied. So if you see something that's white on here, you know no effect's been applied. But let's say you did put that effect on there and you didn't like it, all you have to do is click here to undo it. And like I said, there is a lot more to the program, but I won't be able to go into everything in this short tutorial. So I hope you found this helpful, and take care and have a great day.
You know, this would go much faster if you start taking some boxes out to the car.
It's almost 10:30. Andy's going to be here any minute.
And? Who's that?
The guy from the property management place.